The war ends, but the story begins. The guns have gone silent. The smoke has cleared over Tehran's skyline, but the real battle for Iran's future has only just begun. When the final ceasefire was announced, the world exhaled in relief. Yet beneath that moment of calm, new tensions began to take shape. Iran stands wounded, not just in its cities, but in its economy, its politics, and its people's spirit. This war, unlike any in recent memory, has left deep scars that will take years to heal. And the shockwaves are being felt far beyond Iran's borders. From Riyadh to Tel Aviv, from Washington to Beijing, everyone is recalculating their next move. The Middle East's chessboard has been shaken, and the pieces are now in unpredictable positions. The war's final days, the last weeks of the conflict, were brutal. Urban battles turned neighborhoods into rubble. Oil refineries and power stations were prime targets. Iran's military command fought to the last bullet in key border towns, but logistics collapsed faster than anyone anticipated. The economy was already under sanctions. War just crushed what was left. Food shortages, fuel scarcity, and blackout after blackout pushed civilians to the breaking point. When the ceasefire finally came, it was in tea because either side achieved total victory. It was because both had reached their limits. The human cost: more than 100,000 lives were lost, according to early estimates. Millions have been displaced, seeking refuge in neighboring countries. Hospitals are overwhelmed, struggling to treat both the wounded and the sick. Entire families have been split apart across borders. The trauma is now a part of everyday life. And while the war may be over on paper, for the survivors, it will never truly end. Iran's economy was already fragile before the first missile was fired. Years of sanctions had drained foreign reserves. Inflation was eating away at savings. When war began, what little stability remained was obliterated. The real, Iran's currency, plummeted to historic lows. Unemployment soared as factories shut down and trade routes were severed. Even the country's lifeline, oil exports, was strangled by targeted strikes and international embargoes. Rebuilding will require billions in foreign investment. But who will risk it in such uncertainty? Political shockwaves inside Iran. The war has reshaped the political landscape. Hardliners claim the nation stood tall against foreign aggression. Reformists argue the war was a disaster that should have been avoided. The public is divided. Anger and patriotism coexist in uneasy tension. Protests have erupted over food shortages, corruption, and the slow pace of reconstruction. In the halls of power, factions are jockeying for control of the post-war narrative. The question now is, will Iran unite for recovery or fracture further into political chaos? The war may have ended within Iran's borders, but its impact is echoing across the entire Middle East. Old alliances are being tested. New partnerships are quietly forming in back channels. And some nations are already preparing for the next conflict. Saudi Arabia's calculated moves. Riyadh watched the war with sharp eyes. For years, Saudi Arabia and Iran were locked in a shadow struggle. From Yemen to Lebanon. The destruction of Iran's infrastructure has given Saudi Arabia a momentary advantage. Oil markets, once tightly competitive, now tilt in Riyadh's favor. But Saudi leaders know this window won't last forever. They are investing heavily in defense, technology, and diplomacy, ensuring that when Iran rebuilds, Saudi Arabia is ready to counter. Behind closed doors, intelligence officials are studying every detail of Iran's military collapse. They are asking the same question the rest of the region is asking. What will Iran do next? Israel's strategic calculations. In Tel Aviv, the mood is cautious but opportunistic. For decades, Iran's nuclear ambitions and its support for armed proxies have been Israel's top security concern. With Iran weakened, Israel has a rare opportunity to slow or even halt those programs. Israeli intelligence agencies are monitoring every shipment into Iran, every diplomatic meeting, and every military redeployment. Some experts believe Israel may push for a new regional defense pact, bringing together Arab states that once saw Israel as an enemy. The logic is simple. A weakened Iran is still dangerous, and if it tries to strike back, it won't just be Israel in the crosshairs. it will be the whole region. Turkey's quiet expansion while Saudi Arabia and Israel move openly. Turkey is playing a quieter game. Ankara sees opportunity in Iran's isolation. Trade routes once dominated by Iranian exporters are now up for grabs. Turkish companies are moving fast to fill the gap in markets from Central Asia to the Persian Gulf. On the military side, Turkey is subtly increasing its presence near Iran's northern borders. Officially, it's about regional stability. Unofficially, it's about influence, making sure Turkey has a voice in whatever post-war order emerges. Iran's proxy network, under pressure Lebanon's Hezbollah, Iraq's Popular Mobilization Forces, Yemen's Houthis. These groups have long been the extended arms of Iran's regional power. But with Tehran's resources stretched thin, funding and logistical support are faltering. This doesn't mean they are disappearing. It means they are adapting, finding new sponsors, new supply lines, and in some cases, new agendas. The danger here is fragmentation, proxies acting without central coordination, making the region even more unpredictable. The role of the United States-Washington emerged from the war both relieved and concerned. Relieved that an all-out regional escalation was avoided, concerned that Iran's collapse could create a power vacuum for extremist groups or rival powers to exploit. The U.S. is now increasing its military presence in the Gulf, not for direct confrontation, but as a show of strength and deterrence. Diplomatically, Washington is pushing allies to help stabilize Iran without fully lifting sanctions. It's a delicate balance, offered just enough relief to prevent chaos, but not so much that Iran can rearm quickly. China and Russia step in where the U.S. hesitates. China and Russia see opportunity. China is already in talks to secure long-term energy deals with Iran, betting that once oil exports resume, Beijing will be first in line. Russia, meanwhile, is offering military and reconstruction aid in exchange for deeper strategic ties. Both nations see Iran not just as a partner, but as a geopolitical counterweight to U.S. influence. For Iran, these relationships are a lifeline, but they also come with strings attached. War doesn't just destroy buildings, it destroys economies. And in Iran's case, the economic battlefield may prove just as brutal as the military one. Oil dilemma. Oil has always been Iran's lifeblood. It funds the government, fuels the military, and keeps the economy alive. Yet after the war, many of Iran's oil fields and refineries lie in ruins. Pipelines have been bombed, export terminals are damaged. So even if Iran wanted to restart production tomorrow, it would take months, if not years, to reach pre-war capacity. And here's the bigger problem. The global market is already adjusted to other suppliers. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, even the United States have stepped in to fill the gap. By the time Iran is ready to pump oil again, it may find the world has moved on. The sanctions were strangling Iran long before the war began. They cut off banking access. They blocked foreign investment. They kept advanced technology out of Iranian hands. Now, with the war over, Tehran is desperate for relief. But lifting sanctions isn't simple. The U.S. and its allies want concessions, limits on missile programs, nuclear inspections, and reduced support for regional militias. For Iran's leadership, agreeing to these terms could be seen as surrender. Refusing them could mean economic starvation. It's a high-stakes gamble and the clock is ticking. The rebuilding challenge, reconstruction, will be a monumental task. Cities like Avaz, Kermanshah, and parts of Tehran need entire districts rebuilt from scratch. Infrastructure, roads, bridges, power grids, has been ripped apart. Water and sewage systems are barely functioning. Schools and hospitals are overcrowded or destroyed. Experts estimate that Iran would need over $200 billion in investment just to get back to pre-war conditions. The question is, who will invest in a country still under sanctions? Still politically unstable, and still a potential flashpoint for conflict. 3 possible futures for Iran. The best-case scenario, Iran agrees to a limited diplomatic deal. Sanctions are partially lifted. Reconstruction begins with international aid and private investment. The economy slowly stabilizes. Regional tensions ease, and Iran regains some of its lost influence. It's a most likely scenario, partial recovery, but no major breakthrough. Sanctions remain in place for the most part. Oil exports return at reduced capacity. Domestic unrest continues over unemployment and corruption. Iran maintains its regional proxies, but on a smaller scale. The worst-case scenario, Iran refuses any compromise. Sanctions tighten. Economic collapse deepens. Black markets and smuggling replace formal trade. Internal divisions lead to unrest or even civil conflict. Region on edge, whatever path Iran takes, the entire Middle East will feel the effects. Oil prices will rise or fall based on Tehran's decisions. Alliances will shift depending on whether Iran chooses diplomacy or defiance. And every regional power, from Riyadh to Ankara, will be watching closely, ready to exploit any weakness. The war may have ended on the battlefield, but its shadow still stretches across Iran and across the Middle East. The guns may be silent, but the politics, the rivalries, and the ambitions are still roaring beneath the surface. A nation at a crossroads, Iran now stands at a crossroads. One road leads toward recovery, reconciliation, and cautious diplomacy. The other leads deeper into isolation, instability, and potential collapse. Every decision from here will shape not just Iran's future, but the future of the region. And the choices are not easy. The leadership faces an impossible equation: how to rebuild without surrendering, how to survive without compromising too much. The regional chessboard. Saudi Arabia eyes the board like a careful grandmaster, moving oil policy and diplomatic deals to maintain the upper hand. Israel calculates each move based on security and deterrence, ready to strike if old threats return. Turkey quietly extends its influence into trade, politics, and border security. And Iran's network of proxies, from Lebanon to Yemen, watches and waits, deciding whether to remain loyal or chart their own course. The balance of power is fragile. One wrong move from any player could tip the board into chaos again. Global stakes for the United States. Iran's future is tied to regional stability, energy security, and preventing another war. For China, it's about securing energy and expanding influence in the Gulf. For Russia, it's about keeping a strategic foothold against Western dominance. And for Europe, it's about preventing a refugee crisis, securing trade, and containing nuclear risk. This is why Iran's post-war journey isn't just Iran's problem. It's the world's problem, the people's struggle. Amid all these high-level calculations, ordinary Iranians wake up each day to the reality of survival. Parents search for medicine for their children. Families rebuild homes with their own hands. Students dream of futures that feel further away than ever. These are the people who will ultimately decide whether Iran rises again or fades into prolonged decline. If hope dies among them, no amount of political strategy will save the nation. Why the world should care: a stable Iran could anchor a more peaceful Middle East. An unstable Iran could trigger another decade of conflict. Oil prices, global markets, migration patterns, even the security of distant nations, all are linked to what happens in Tehran's halls of power. The war may have ended without a clear victor, but the peace, if it can be called peace, is fragile, temporary, and full of hidden dangers. Closing message to the audience: the story of Iran after the war is still being written. Every week brings new deals, new tensions, and new surprises. And while the world watches from a distance, the people of Iran live it every day. The question is not just what will happen next. The real question is, will the world be ready for the answer? Because in the Middle East, history doesn't end with a ceasefire, it only changes shape. The next chapter could be closer than we think.